Welcome to the Dialogue Book Report, where we talk about literature and arts of interest to LDS readers. I'm Andrew Hall, an editor at Dialogue, a journal of Mormon thought, coming to you from Fukuoka, Japan. And today, we are going to talk about short stories by LDS authors, and I'm joined by two great authors, editors, commentators. Theric Jepson is a former president of the Association of Mormon Letters, the current editor of Irreantum, and the author of such books as Bjuk, Just Julie's Fine, and the editor of Served, a Missionary Comics Anthology, and the Monsters and Mormons Anthology. I'm also joined by Robert Bennett, who is an English professor at Montana State University. His satirical Mormon short stories have been published in Weber, The Contemporary West, Irreantum, and Dialogue. And he publishes short-form literary analysis of Mormon short stories on his Substack, Mormon Short Stories. Theric and Robert, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
So Robert has been doing a lot of writing about criticism about recent collections of short fiction and novels on his Substack. So I thought he'd let him take the lead on what we want to talk about today. So Robert, what should we talk about?
So I'll just introduce myself. I'm very new to Mormon fiction, unlike Theric and even you, Andrew, who've been around in these fields for a long time. I've been teaching literature at Montana State for 25 years now, but I had hardly ever read Mormon fiction, let alone taught it. I barely even taught short stories. I think in the 100 classes that I've taught, I've maybe only taught 3 collections of short stories up until the last couple of years when I started focusing on Mormon short stories. And now I see myself primarily over the last couple of years, I used sort of a sabbatical to transition from writing traditional academic papers to writing fiction. And now I sort of see myself as a Mormon short story writer, first and foremost. But for me, there's a lot of synergy between my work as a professor and a literary critic and a short story writer. You know, I've started this Substack at Mormon Short Stories, which I use to analyze and write critical analyses of Mormon short stories. They're kind of longer than a blog post or a book review, but shorter than a traditional academic paper. And they're written in a kind of intelligent and engaging style, but not in kind of a dry academic style. Try to be more of a public intellectual there, and have an informed but general readership. But for me, it's been really synergistic to be writing about Mormon short stories and writing them as well. And I know for Theric, he's worn a lot of hats. I don't know what you consider yourself primarily, a writer, an editor, a critic, all of the above. What's sort of been your experience in wearing many hats?
It depends, I guess, on how you weigh things. I think of myself as a writer first, but and writer of fiction specifically. But in terms of my output, that, maybe not. Written a lot of criticism, published a lot of poems. Yeah, it's a good question, and I do think that there's an excellent chance that if anything I'm doing is going to matter to the field after I'm gone, it might be editing, because that's the way to get the most people involved. And I think having as many people involved in a small niche like this, that's better. That's better for everybody. The more people who get on the boat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I sort of started my writing career in a sort of niche subfield of the minor Mormon story. My first piece I wrote for Dialogue was called The New Calling, and it was about an assistant ward librarian. And then the second piece I wrote for Irreantum, and Theric edited it, and it was about an assistant ward mission leader. And that's sort of where I got my in to write about. But at Theric's editing, you kind of say to be a great writer, it takes a great editor, because you need someone who has a little distance from the project that can see it with fresh eyes. And that's interesting. You say, in some ways, your contribution has been as an editor, as well as a writer. And it's really important. I know you, Andrew, have been an editor as well. Um, Sometimes we forget the role that played, the editor plays. And it reminds me of the famous Pound editing of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, where it's not even clear who was the primary author by the time that Pound got through with it. Um, but I really have believed that these different roles really reinforce each other, and having a good editor has made me a better writer. And I assume that for Theric, being an editor has only helped him become a better writer, because they're sort of interchangeable skills.
It's true. And I think that we live in a curious moment where there are so many people who want to write and so few people who engage in editing in the way, say, Ezra Pound did, or the way like Thomas Wolfe's editor did, this kind of really intense in there working on the piece with the writer. That doesn't happen very much. And I probably couldn't do it a whole lot more than I do, but I do have opportunities to engage with writers and talk about their work. And I think that a good editor is also a good teacher, and it should leave the writer better, more able to see their own work clearly and able to move forward on the next piece with new tools and new skills and new abilities. And each time they grow a little bit more.
Yeah, and the other thing that's been synergistic for me is reading and writing. You know, I think both of you are probably much better read in Mormon fiction than I am. Uh, Even when I started teaching short stories, I didn't start reading much Mormon fiction um, until just the last year or two, when I started getting this Substack together. Um, and I've sort of been on a crash course uh, trying to read more, and seeing how much that helps me develop as a writer, especially when I write about what I'm reading and think about it very intentionally. Um, and from the perspective of a writer, what makes a work of literature good, what makes a good short story, um, kind of focusing on that. Um, so my Substack has been really, really helpful in that regard.
Mhm. It's a great addition, and so it's been quite a crash course with all the work that you've been doing on that. It's great to see these kind of long form essays on these works that really deserve it.
It's also great that you're conversing with both current short stories, but also ones from decades past, and sort of crashing them into each other and doing it in a way that forces people to disagree with you. Right. So you don't leave a lot of neutral ground a lot of times with your rhetorical stance. And I think that's great because it encourages people to form their own opinion, because they know if somebody just reads yours and they just accept your opinion, they know that they're really accepting like a strong opinion, and unless they're really sure it's theirs. So I think you're encouraging people to consider the work.
Well, and there's really been two things I've done with the Substack. One is I started out trying to do an overview of what I thought were the three principal anthologies of Mormon short stories: Eugene England's Bright Angels and Familiars, Angela Hallstrom's Dispensations, and Andrews and Perry Robert Raleigh's The Path and the Gate. And that's really what I thought was out there. And I started out reviewing those. And as I got into it more, I realized there were two other major anthologies I wanted to include. Um, Raleigh's In Our Lovely Deseret, and Johnny Townsend and Jeff Laver's Latter-day Saints both came into my view, and I've written about all of them, and I'm just going to write about Latter-day Saints in June, and that will sort of complete looking at all of them. But I really saw that there was sort of a civil war going on in Mormon short story writing, that England and Hallstrom's anthologies were a lot more traditional and a little bit devotional. And In Our Lovely Deseret and Latter-day Stories, Latter-day Saints were kind of more critical of the church, a lot more sexuality, a little more experimental, certainly less devotional. And there were sort of these two sides going back and forth. And I kind of found myself in the middle of a civil war I didn't even know was going on. And I've been trying to kind of talk about that and negotiate it. But just a little teaser, in my post for June, I now have 5 anthologies, but there's only 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. So I finally have to make a decision. And like you say, Theric, take a critical stand and say which of these, do I think are the 4 most important. Not that you have to have a Mount Rushmore, but it's always makes for good criticism.
Well, there's nothing like a list to get people up and talking. The Guardian's recent list, I've heard so much conversation, so many different corners about this.
You have so many lists on your Substack, Theric, about everything under the sun. My wife and I are going to go through your list of rom-coms that you posted recently. Oh,
All right, I'll look forward to your feedback.
yeah. And you're certainly one to throw your own opinion out there, and not be afraid of it as well. So your Substack makes a very good read as well.
Well, thank you. And one of the best compliments I've gotten from a student recently was third hand. She told her mother told my wife told me, it eventually made its way to me. But what she said was something like, in my class, she felt like everybody could express their opinion. Everybody listened. I listened. I was genuinely interested in what they had to say, which I took as a huge compliment, because I think in any space where these kind of arguments are taking place, they only really succeed when everyone accepts that everybody else's opinion also deserves to be heard. Because it's great that I have my opinions, and it's great that you have your opinions, but until we listen to each other, we can't really be sure that we've arrived at the correct opinions.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
So, Robert, looking at these 30 years of anthologies, so you see this divide of kind of whether they're more outsider or insider. What other developments have you seen, and what changes have you seen maybe in Mormon fiction over those 30 years?
Well, I was kind of thinking a little bit about sort of the future of the Mormon short story, and kind of where after looking at that span of stories, thinking about where do we see these stories headed and where might they go next. And two of the things that I sort of thought about is, first of all, just how good the story writing is today. When I looked at The Path and the Gate, I'm interested in writing about just about every story in that anthology. And that's not true of some of the earlier anthologies. All of the anthologies have great stories and stories I wanted to write about. But the amount of writing, the consistency of the writing, the quality of the writing just seems to be getting better. And that's true outside of the anthologies. When you look at the collections, the other thing that I'm trying to do on my Substack is be kind of a hype man and let people know about what's being written today. I don't want to really create a Mormon literature class where we go back to the 19th century and read everything that's been written. I'm writing more to someone who just wants a good book of short stories, preferably something more contemporary, and kind of be part of the conversation of what's going on today, rather than trying to master the whole tradition. And so I try to just write about some of the recent anthology or collections, I guess. And I've just been really impressed with how many high quality collections are coming out, and almost every one I want to write about. Um, I have sort of an abundance of riches. The only thing constraining me is time. Uh, just about everything being written uh, is is pretty high quality at the moment, and so I see a real renaissance, a kind of golden age for the Mormon short story. And the second thing is I see a little bit of a healing of that civil war that I mentioned. That I feel like if you look at the path and the gate, there's bishops who drink coffee. Um, it's not three Nephites bringing Johnny cakes to poor women on the plains. Um, it's a it's a more modern. It's it's not devotional in a kind of um negative sense, but it's also not what Eugene England accused In Our Lovely Deseret of being in your face impiety. It's not that at all. um and So I see a kind of joining of forces, or a kind of middle ground, where you have voices on both sides of that divide, um, coming together. And I think that's partly what's making this a golden age for the Mormon short story, is that it's not people digging into one side or the other, but people really exploring a middle ground territory that creates a big tent that includes a lot of voices.
Well, Theric, you see stories coming by as editor of Irreantum. Have you seen any kind of developments over the years, changes in theme or direction of authors?
It's a good question. I agree with Robert saying in terms of the bounty, and at the same time I disagree because I was on, I don't know if this probably wasn't the book report because that's always you, Andrew, but I was on the Dialogue podcast recently with your fiction editors,
Ryan, yeah.
Ryan and Joe, and one of the things we agreed on is we just don't get enough submissions. There just aren't enough, and I don't know exactly how it's going for Sunstone. I know Wayfair has a rule that they'll only publish a fiction writer once per year, and so I don't know how that's influencing them. But they have a tendency to reach out to people and ask people to write for them also. So but so to answer your question, I'm not sure there's really a big enough sample size to be sure exactly what the trends are just from looking at what comes across the transom over at Irreantum. I will say that the variety is very interesting, and the quality is good to great, and I'm also really enthused that I have managed to publish a number of people for the first time. Chris, is it Chris McCullough who just had a poetry collection come out? I was the first to publish him. I think I was the first to publish Isaac James Richard. And so there are these great writers that we're discovering, and I like being part of that, because where I said I agree and disagree with Robert. What I think is, if I can think fourth dimensionally, I feel really positive about the future. I feel that the trends are really good, that people are willing to enter the Mormon letter space, but they also don't feel trapped there. They can move in, they can move out, and I just get a feeling that there's a lot of good stuff to come.
All right.
And I guess on that note, um, we could talk a little bit. I think soon there's going to be released the nominees for the short story awards for the Association for Mormon Letters. And I think there's a lot of really strong stories coming out there. First and foremost, I might mention, is it Jenny Rebecca Ryting's Sister Wives that was in your Irreantum special issue, Eternity or Eternities of Cats?
Eternities of Cats. Yeah, I was very pleased with that. And now,
Yeah, and I think that was one of the highlights of last year's publications, and that included some previously published work plus Jenny's new work. Um, but maybe you could talk for a moment, Theric, about that special issue and specifically Jenny's story, and how you saw that as important to what Irreantum's doing, in addition to just the traditional quarterly publication.
yeah. Yeah, Jenny's story came in and she said, "Hey, it's really long. Do you want to look at it?" I said, "I'd love to look at it. I'm almost definitely not going to publish it. I don't usually do things this long." And the story was great. I really wanted to publish it. And so that was her story, was the birth of Eternities of Cats. It wouldn't have existed otherwise. I was like, okay, I got Jenny's story, but what am I going to do with it exactly? And I had recently read Michael Fillerup's story that's in Eternities of Cats. His short story collection is currently on my nightstand. In fact, I was counting in my head while you were talking, Robert, and I think I have 4 Mormon short story collections on my nightstand right now. I have Michael's, I have Donald Marshall's Rummage Sale, a classic. I have William Morris's new collection, and I have Steve Peck's Pleasant Grove stories. So there's a lot out there. But I had read that, and of course I knew Melissa Leilani Larson's play, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are all about polygamy being reinstituted in the modern day. And there's nothing like polygamy. it haunts us, it hangs over us, it lies underneath us. You just can't escape it. And to have these 3 really amazing stories all together, I thought would be really interesting for audiences. And so happily, Michael and Melissa were happy to jump in and be part of it. And it's a beautiful little collection, and I'm satisfied with it. It's probably not for everybody. Not everybody wants to read another word about polygamy again in their life, but these 3 stories about the reinstitution of polygamy in the modern day, so different from each other, all so well written. I'm really grateful for the praise, because I think it turned out great, and praise goes to the writers.
Do you know if that's Jenny's first story?
It is Jenny's. Jenny is now another person I've been the first person to publish. She's a scholar, of course. She's published academic work, but this is her first piece of fiction.
Yeah, when I read it, I was so impressed. I looked her up to try to see if she's written more stuff. And it looked like it was her first publication. But she's a Jane Austen scholar. And it really came across in the story that it's written with the same quality and kind of comedy of manners, attention to detail that you see in a Jane Austen story. So even if you're not interested in polygamy, if you're interested in Jane Austen, I think you could appreciate it.
And Melissa is also a Jane Austen. I think scholar is a fair term. She's not an academic per se, but she's written adaptations for the stage of multiple Jane Austen novels, and I think Jane Austen's an influence there also. If you like Jane,
And,
I know I do.
Again, to go back to Path in the Gate, that was one of the anthologies that got me excited about writing my Substack. Was they were just stories I wanted to write about as a literature professor. And it was the same with Eternities of Cats. I think that was the next one that I wrote about. I think I called it The Secret Lives of Sister Wives. And I love titles. I think that alone got me interested in wanting to write about it, playing off of the Hulu series. Speaking of titles, my latest story is The Mile High Club that I'm working on. And it's, of course, about 2 missionaries trying to give away a Book of Mormon on the plane. And I think I'm writing it primarily for the double entendre of the title alone. I felt like it was a story that needed to be written.
The the polygamy stories is such a great place for tragedy and comedy. I love that Michael Fillerup does one that focuses on men. Well, of course, it reverses the situation where they're going to do polygamy, but women can have more than one husband in this case, and it's a great comic, tragic look at the possibilities of that. But I mean, you bring up with your story, Robert, missionaries are still a ripe area for stories, and the James Goldberg has this great one, and Rand Shoemaker's stories of missionaries are so brutal, very very brutal about,
and very powerful stories. They're some of the most powerful Mormon short stories I know. Some of his missionary stories.
a real sense of kind of guilt, I think, of the way he treated, way he, or I mean, I don't know how autobiographical it is, but clearly looking back at the experience and seeing the selfishness of missionaries. I noticed, actually, I was reading his Righteous Road, and the it has the one story about a selfish missionary, but then I noticed, oh, it actually doesn't have Mouthful of Yaya, which Theric published, but it's very similar. It's kind of similar people, but with a much more brutal ending.
I don't know how it could be more brutal.
No. Yours, that's the brutal one.
Mine did. That's
the most brutal one. The one that he has is more realistic in his collection, is more realistic, and but emotionally brutal too, of the missionary turning on in Italy against betraying a African convert. So anyway, but you liked, Robert, you liked the James Goldberg one as well.
I think the James Goldberg one is nominated in the short story category. I think it's The Strange Case of Frau K.
Okay, that's right,
or something like that. It's a mystery story in the sense that the two missionary, and a missionary story as well, but the two missionaries are the detectives trying to figure out why an investigator is reticent about going to church. And they have to kind of uncover what's going on. And it turns out to be a really interesting and complicated backstory that you are really expecting. But he tells the missionary story as a kind of mystery story. Was it published in Irreantum?
It was. It was in our mystery. I published it. Yeah, it was in the mystery issue.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think James's story suggests something about the future of the missionary story, in that there's no reason the missionary genre can't be crossbred with other genres. Why not take a missionary story and make it a mystery? We've seen a couple examples of that. Tim Workus's a city of light and brick, stone and light. What's it called?
Brick
is a great novel.
In the Brick and Shadow and Brick, maybe.
Brick and Shadow and Brick, something like that. Yeah, it's really good. It's a really great book.
That's one of the great Mormon novels about detective missionaries in Brazil in that case.
Yeah, fabulous. And I think this is fabulous. This is a really great theme, because one of the problems with missionary fiction sometimes is it gets trapped in the rules of its genre, and this sort of mixing and matching of what kind of story it is I think a really positive way forward.
Another clever collection of sort of mystery, horror, sci-fi stories is Henrik Sorensen's Thin Black Veil. Came out this year. They're good stories, but there was one in particular about a sort of mystery horror hidden under the crawl through spaces under the stage in the Mormon gym. And all of us have had experiences as children crawling into those and kind of feeling like they're mysterious spaces. And I think that that was a really clever story that I read this year as well.
Okay. Well, it's open. There I am. Okay, good. Yeah. All right. What other authors do you want to talk about? Who else has been?
Well, I think Ryan Shoemaker's A Righteous Road is one of the most important releases probably in the last several years. In my Substack, I kind of talk about it in more detail, but really describe it as the best book I've read so far. And I guess that two things that stand out is all the stories are Mormon themed. And I know in his first book he had some Mormon themed and some other ones, but for people specifically interested in Mormon short stories about Mormon themes, um, it's such an excellent place to go. And the second thing is, I would say, is the range of his writing. Um, he writes very serious stories with important moral points and poignant emotional conundrums, such as the missionary story you mentioned. But he also writes laugh out loud, funny stories. Um, he's just a master of comedy. And one that was in Path in the Gate, the story about a god who's just gone through God University and is learning to create his first planet, which is full of all kinds of comic hijinks. And another one in Righteous Road is a retelling of the Garden of Eden story, um, with a kind of a feminist bent. And the Edith is the Eve character who insists on Lilith instead of Eve, um, kind of puts Fod and Adam in their place, and kind of runs the place. And it's kind of a really funny retelling of that myth.
Very. I love these stories as well, and like some really hard moral conundrums, like you say, and he's he can be very tough on these characters, these Mormon characters. He's loving, but very tough on them, but very clear stories. I think even though they're difficult conundrums, they're very clear. I've been reading Matthew Babcock's Future Perfect, which is not all Mormon, but certainly they tend to be set in Idaho, and they have often kind of Mormon backgrounds, at least to the characters. And it's I like them a lot, but they're much more opaque. You're not quite sure what these people are thinking, what they're doing, why are they making these choices, um, and that's kind of exciting sometimes to kind of dig into these things, but they're opaque and it can be a little difficult. Well, I think Ryan's stories, they're always really clear. Just I gallop through the stories a lot more with him because it's just such a fun ride. I think he's such a skilled writer of 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 plot in his stories as well.
I think I said in my review, I cited, is it Chekhov, who says that this the task of a writer isn't to solve a question, but to pose a problem. And that's what uh, Ryan does so well, is he may not tell you what the answer is, but he makes the dilemma or the problem or the conundrum very clear, so you know
So we know something.
Oh,
Oh,
he's frozen for you too.
Yeah. Well, oh,
Oh, you're back.
Robert, we lost you. We lost your last thing that you said about Ryan.
oh,
Froze
just
up.
that he poses the problem so clearly. You understand the problem. There's no question about what's going on in the story.
And Ryan is the editor, co-editor of fiction at Dialogue with
Joe Flicka.
Joe Flicka, right?
Yeah.
Now you've also Stephen Tuttle. We should be somewhere by now. Is going to be the winner of the AML Short Fiction Award for this year. Robert, what can you tell us about that one?
So one other thing I wanted to mention about the future of the Mormon short story is the way in which Mormon publications and national publications are coming together at the moment. And there's two, there's Stephen Tuttle's collection, and I think for the short story, Nathan Curtis Roberts's story, Yellow Tulips, um, was nominated. And both of those are really prominent national publications that go beyond the community of the traditional community of Mormon readers, the Dialogue, Sunstone, BCC Press community. And Tuttle's story is published by Cornerstone Press, which is emerging as a real national powerhouse for publishing short stories. They also publish Ryan Habermeyer's Salt Fork collection, both really solid collections being published by a prominent national press. And Roberts's story, Yellow Tulips, was anthologized in both the Best American Short Stories anthology and the Pushcart Prize anthology, which shows a lot of recognition for Mormon writers. Tuttle's book isn't about Mormon themes, it's just good writing. But the other ones are about Mormon themes as well. But seeing a national interest in Mormon writing and Mormon writers, I think is a really good sign, again, of the quality of the writing that's coming out.
Stephen Tuttle also teaches at BYU. So I guess he's a teacher of fiction there as well. So one of our educators.
Yeah, and I might add there that I'm teaching a short story class this fall, and I'm going to teach Shoemaker's Righteous Road and the lead story in Tuttle's collection. It has a complicated name I can't pronounce. But it won an award from Dialogue or the AML many years ago, and it's found its way into this collection.
Amanuensis?
What?
Is it amanuensis?
Amanuensis.
Yeah, that was I don't remember where it was originally published, but it also appeared in Angela Hallström's collection, Dispensation.
Oh yeah, okay. But it's a great story. I'm going to teach it, and Ryan's story really unapologetically as just belonging in a literature course, not just a Mormon literature course.
Theric, how about you? What other authors have you been interested in recently?
Oh, it's a good question. I've been excited about new venues. For instance, Further Light has appeared. I've enjoyed this is something that I think it's great when journals do, where it's doing both fiction and poetry and criticism in the same location, trying to capture an audience that may be interested in one and introduce them to another thing. I think that's always great. I mentioned the 4 writers on my nightstand. Exciting, always exciting when any of those writers. I mean, is Donald Marshall, has he passed, Andrew? Is he still with us?
Yeah, no, he passed away.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So we won't be expecting anything new from him, but it's new to me, right? I've known about this book for a long time, and I'm finally reading it, and I'm really excited to get into Williams' book. I haven't. I keep letting other things cut in line, and I sent a copy of Stephen's book to my son, who because I knew that the story about the woman who studies river health and becomes a dragon, this would be right up his alley. I'm not really answering your question, but my point is that no matter where you look, there's cool stuff to read. And so, everything on Irreantum is free. Hop on Irreantum. Everything on Dialogue is free. Hop on Dialogue. If you're patient, everything on Further Light eventually shows up there. Somebody tell Sunstone to do the same. Their website is several years out of date. But Wayfair is full of great stuff. You just start looking, and you will find something that you love. it's guaranteed.
Remind us what Further Light is.
So Further Light is Liz Busby's new project. It is, I forget the exact full title, but it's something about science fiction and fantasy from Latter-day Saint lens. I've published a short story with them in their first issue. I have a work of criticism coming out in the second. I absolutely plan to submit again. One of the great things that I like that Further Light is doing, and I wish more venues would do this, is also republishing things. Stories don't deserve to be published once in a small magazine and then never seen again. If it's good, it should find an audience again and again. And although about half of what they published in the first issue had been published somewhere else, I think, if I remember correctly, I don't think I'd seen any of it before it appeared in Further Light. And I'm pretty tapped in to the scene. And so it's exciting that they're covering so much ground. And this is of course, science fiction and fantasy in the Latter-day Saints is a topic that is always coming back to the forefront of people's attention. And it's nice to have someone serious leading the charge on really considering what's going on here and what's new and what's fresh and where it may go next.
Theric and William Morris co-edited Monsters and Mormons, a great speculative fiction collection that had some older stories in it as well, or those all new?
We did. We had a couple reprints. For instance, we republished Eric James Stone's
Leviathan.
it won the Hugo. No, it won the Nebula, I believe. That Leviathan whom thou hast made, which is a terrific story about giant whale-like creatures that live inside the sun and become converted to the gospel, but have some issues that don't come up when you're human.
Robert, you've read some of William's fiction, right?
Yeah, I have a Substack post on his fiction. If you want to read in more detail, but I talk principally about The Darkest Abyss, that collection, and one of my favorite of his stories is, I think, The Ward Organist. I think was published in Dialogue, and it's just a very delightful story. It fits with my minor ward callings theme, you know.
Yeah, you'll have to put a book together.
I posted the link to the Ward Organist Facebook group, and a couple people posted back that they really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's cool to hear.
But I was going to say another good thing going on in Mormon Stories right now is the expansion of venues, with Further Light coming out with a new area for science fiction fantasy. I've started reading stories at Sunstone. I don't know that they've had a lot of creative writing presentations. I'm going to read the Mile High Club at the end of July at the conference. And that's one thing I'm trying to commit to, is going every year and reading a story. I'd like to know if someone could talk to Wayfair and encourage them to publish more than one short story. I think they have the possibility there, and I think it would only strengthen their readership to diversify a little bit more there.
Did you want?
But I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, Wayfair Publishing now, I mean, several stories a year. We say they do one. Is that one per their physical issue? Is that
so? One per author per year,
Oh.
And they started out just doing one piece of fiction per month, but I think they might be over that now. And I'm not sure about the physical issues. I've never sat down and counted, even though I get those in the mail.
The physical issue just has one story,
Just
at
one
least
story.
what I've seen so far. Yeah.
Theric, you've actually, I was looking back through recent stories, and you've published at Wayfair, Dialogue, Sunstone, and you edited Irreantum. You
true.
published in all those in last.
And I've been in Further Light too.
And you've been Further Light.
Yeah, there you go.
Got them all. And I also published a very Mormon story about a sister missionary giving blood, and not one of those this past year too. So I've It's been going well.
Good, good. Does that mean, so you mean it was not a Mormon related publication?
It was not a Mormon related publication, but it was accepted and published. So my sister missionary stories out there.
Good. So do you see any major differences with the approaches between, you'd say Wayfarer and Dialogue and Irreantum?
I think so. I don't know that. Well, as I was saying, there's a hunger for good work. If you're a writer, submit to these publications. We all need more submissions than we're receiving. That's just a true thing. Working with Ryan and Joe is delightful. They are certainly big into quirky, strange stuff and beautifully written stuff. They're both academic writers. I believe they both have MFAs, so that and they do sort of fit into that niche. I don't mean that in any sort of pejorative way. And Janine B, who's currently editing Wayfarer, her interests are very broad. She does love to see stuff that is a bit weird in the sense of not in terms of the writing per se, but in terms of the subjects. Last year she published my story about missionaries baptizing a nine-tailed fox, and she likes that kind of stuff. So and Sunstone, I do not know what's going on with Sunstone, but when I send one of my Mormon Socrates stories to Stephen, he's always happy to get them, but I'm not really sure what they're up to these days. But each of them have their slightly different interests, and stuff, they'll take stuff, they won't take stuff. Don't forget about the Mormon Lit Blitz, of course, which is one of the best and most important venues for producing new work. And it's exciting to be part of these different spaces because they all have slightly different tastes, but they all are very friendly to each other. Like Robert said, like the Civil War is over. I think there's really room for people along the spectrum in terms of style and genre and devotion to publish in shared spaces. And I think that's really healthy, and I think it's beautiful, and also it's a lot of fun because you just never know what you're going to see next.
Yeah,
and once again, I didn't answer your question.
That was good.
Mormon Lit Blitz is something we didn't mention, but another nominee is Citlalli Xochitiotzin. I'm butchering the name, but the story is Time a Particle, and it was in the Mormon Lit Blitz finalists, and it was published in Wayfarer as well. So again, that cross-pollination between venues. It's a microfiction, 1,000 words or whatever, but a very powerful story. I'm not a big fan of microfiction. I think it's too hard for me to say much in that limited space. But this is an example of a microfiction that really pulls off the genre effectively and in an engaging way.
One of the things that
I was going to just mention an example of going beyond English. That's James at the Mormon Lit Blitz kind of led the way in that, and that's kind of moved into Irreantum and Wayfarer and Dialogue of publishing more stories, mostly in Spanish, but also some Portuguese stories as well. So that's been a nice development in the last 5 years or so.
Yes, and would love to see more of that. I'm always trying to reach out to people from other nations. It's really hard to find the person who will, because this is a serious task to take on. Haven't found those people in other nations yet, but it's exciting to know that there are writers. I'm sure there are in every nation. There's at least somebody working in their closet, and I think that's great. But the thing I want to say about the Mormon Lit Blitz, the thing that I think it is most successful at compared to all of these other venues, is they're very successful at providing a deadline that people get excited about and push each other to meet. And so a lot of the work that's published by the other venues, I think, started life for the Mormon Lit Blitz. I mean, my Wayfarer story we mentioned, that was a finalist for the Mormon Lit Blitz. My Dialogue story that came out last year started as a Mormon Lit Blitz story. I have some longer stories also that were intended for the Mormon Lit Blitz, but as Robert said, you can't do everything in 1,000 words. So sometimes they end up being much longer than that. But then they exist and they end up finding homes, and I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of writers feel the Mormon Lit Blitz as an excuse to finally, get something down. And I think a few of our very good writers, it's the only time of the year they write is for the Mormon Lit Blitz. And I think it's great that they're pushing people to make stuff, and then those stories end up finding homes.
Robert, looking at the list of ones you want to talk about, David Pace's American Trinity is on there. What can you tell us about that book collection?
Yeah, so I have a post on that as well. I think the title of that one is Oral Sex in an AML award-winning literature collection, mostly using the clickbait title there. But again, to show you that Civil War being over, he's got some challenging stories. One that's he has actually oral sex in two stories. One that's a little more lighthearted and humorous. One that's a little bit more serious and even semi-tragic at some level. But it shows, and I think it's published by BCC Press. Quite correct?
I think that's right.
Yeah, Constant, yeah.
Which shows that challenging literature is being published. But the story I think I talk most about is the title story, American Trinity, which is a three Nephites story, but not at all the story about sort of what I call the do-goodery of changing people's tires. One of the three Nephites falls into that stereotype a little bit, but the main Nephi that it discusses is this deep, poetic, philosophical person ruminating on the meaning of literature and words and the power of words to change history. And I forget if I called it Hamlet, played by Matthew McConaughey, third Nephite. I think that was my reference. But this kind of brooding soul, very different kind of three Nephite story, and much more experimental, and in my view, a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite three Nephite stories. But this is another genre that I think is so interesting, and we should have a renaissance of three Nephite stories, in my opinion. Speaking of William Morris, he wrote one of my favorite three Nephite stories. Speaking of Johnny Townsend, I'm not a big fan of his work. I think it's kind of sloppy, but he wrote a three Nephite story that I really like. And it's such an interesting genre, and we need more of that. Write three Nephite stories.
Okay, Theric.
What else can be done with that?
You have to read my review of Latter-day Saints that's coming out this month.
Okay.
Because I'll challenge you on the Johnny Townsend there.
Well, you should. Like
I won't speak for all of his stories. He's written so many that I'm sure there's some clunkers in there somewhere. But the story in that anthology, I think, is.
He's the editor of that, right? Those aren't all his stories.
He's one of the editors.
Yeah.
I would even say it's not a perfectly polished story, but it engages a significant theme in a very powerful way, and a very complex literary use of at least certain lines in that story. And the way it kind of goes back and forth between a sort of over the top comic, blasphemous story, but also a deeply thoughtful story. A little bit like I said about Ryan Shoemaker, how he has that range. This is a story that has that range within the same story. And I find it to be a pretty compelling story. But
I'm always happy to be wrong. I'll send you the link to my Motley Vision review about the last time I read him. So it has been 14 years. So
What did you read?
let's see. It was a collection of just his stories, and it's real close. I'm on the right page. It is Mormon Fairy Tales from 2011.
Interesting. Well, I know he's got a million stories out there, so
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of editors, I think Johnny Townsend could be. I think I would like him a lot more if he had more opportunities to work with editors who would help him refine his stories. Because, like you said, it can be a little loose sometimes. But I think there's potential there, and I would never tell anyone to give up on someone because I didn't like them once upon a time in 2012.
Also on the kind of the far end of challenging stories, I believe Ryan Habermeyer likes to do his work. Robert, what do you think of Ryan's? Well, he has a novel that came out recently that you've reviewed. But so not just short stories, but where do you think Ryan Habermeyer, one of our Ryans, fits into?
well, I haven't reviewed his collection of short stories yet. I've read them a little while ago and haven't thought about them in depth. But I think you invited me to do a review for Dialogue of his novel Necronauts that's just been published or forthcoming. Recently published, I think.
That sounds really interesting.
I really enjoyed reading it and wrote a very positive review that it's again more experimental than you typically see in Mormon fiction, but very effectively so.
Yeah, his stories tend to be, very, not of this world. You're not like, what is this world? And then there's worlds where there's, large icebergs in North America that people are trying to deal with, and just lots of strange and hard to comprehend stories, but also very fun sometimes.
My go-to comp is Donald Bartholomew and George Saunders. That's what I'm looking for in Mormon fiction of the future. But Habermeyer's novel has a little bit of Pynchon, which is another pretty superlative comment to be mentioned in the same sentence with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of the things that we wanted to cover in this. Any other thing you want to add in, either one of you?
Well, I'll just say my final comment will be that I'm going to try to make this an annual thing, but to write reviews of at least most of the AML nominees for short story or short story collection. So in the next couple of months, you'll see me writing about Tuttle, and I'm going to repost my review of Eternity of Cats. And I think I've got one about Nathan Curtis Roberts's Yellow Tulips. So, I say, I'm not a history of the whole, but if I can interest people in just reading a couple of the things that are going on today, that's really one of my goals, to sort of put out there positive review. Okay. Someone,
Yeah.
just
All right, we're losing Robert here.
dip their toe in what's going on at home.
Okay, Theric, do you have any?
Yeah,
closing thoughts?
I would say for all you readers out there, to revisit something that I was saying about Further Light, and is also true of Irreantum, those really great stories from the past that deserve a second audience, like let editors know about them. There's room for them in the present too, and we'd love to share them. And of course, we want to hear from writers, and we want people to share with each other. Let's build the readership. Let's give a place for our writers, these great writers who are making such interesting work. Let's give them an audience. So share the stuff you love with other people, and send in your own work, and let's grow the space.
Well, thank you both so much for all the work that you're doing. I mean, you're such great authors of original fiction yourselves, but that you also spend this time to be editors or critics of other people's works. I really appreciate it. And it's not a huge field, but it's big enough that I can't read everything. So having this direction when you point out, good things to look at, I really appreciate it. Well,
I will say
please.
it helps to have a day job at a university where I get paid to read and write this stuff. It's a little bit of my payback to the community that I have that time to do that.
Theric is a high school teacher, so a little more challenging, but we appreciate that.
But I will add, he's much more prolific than I am, so I'm not sure how he does it.
I don't know either. I will say that writing breeds writing. The more I do, the more I'm able to do. So there's probably some sort of life lesson there for all of us.
All right. Well, thank you both, Robert and Theric. And this show is produced and edited by Daniel Foster Smith, who also provides the music, and our content manager is Emily Jensen. To hear more writing and discussion of literature, please go to dialoguejournal.com and Irreantum and Wayfair and Sunstone and Further Light and all these great places. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Rebecca Rytting, and I'm thrilled to serve as a board member at the Dialogue Foundation and as one of the hosts of Dialogue Gospel Study. In each episode, which we record live the second and fourth Sunday of every month, we welcome esteemed speakers from a variety of backgrounds to share their insights and perspectives on the Come Follow Me lessons. Our aim is to spark meaningful conversations about the scriptures, to connect them to our personal experiences and to our understandings and explorations of the gospel. To stay in the loop with our upcoming lessons and this opportunity to engage with Mormon thought, culture, and belief, be sure to visit dialoguejournal.com and sign up for our newsletter. By doing so, you'll receive updates and timely links to join our live stream lessons. Additionally, you can catch up on our past guests and episodes by subscribing to Dialogue Journal on YouTube, Facebook, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Dialogue Podcast Network.